Authors all around the world are trying to reduce their reliance on Amazon. Most of us still use and like Amazon. In fact, for most of us, we get most of our money from Amazon. But any company with a 90% market share can't be fully trusted. And one way that indie authors are getting away from Amazon is by selling directly to readers through their website. This not only gives them some protection from the changes at an international company, but it also gives them more money, more control, and more flexibility over pricing, over bundling, and so much more. I did an interview with Joanna Penn all about selling directly on your website. And it's a great interview if you're curious about selling directly to readers. And in that episode, we talked mostly about your website and how to sell, what software to get, and the benefits and reasons why you should consider selling directly to readers. And during that interview, Joanna mentioned a new service that had emerged in the UK that she used to connect to her website, that once a reader placed an order, the service would print and ship the book directly to that reader, making selling physical books on her website almost as painless as selling on Amazon, but where she got to keep most of the money rather than sharing most of the money with Amazon. Now, at that time, when I interviewed her, the service was primarily for the UK. It was just barely dipping its toes into the US market. But I'm happy to say that Bookvault has now come to America, and that is what we're going to talk about. So what is Bookvault and how can you use it as an author? We'll find out in this episode of Novel Marketing, the longest running book marketing podcast in the world. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr., CEO of Author Media, and this is the show for writers who want to build their platform, sell more books, and make a living writing books worth talking about. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast by clicking follow in the podcast app on your phone. And today, we're joined by a special guest. He is the technical lead at Bookvault and responsible for developing all the latest Bookvault features. Alex Smith, welcome to the Novel Marketing Podcast.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so tell us the story of Bookvault. What is it and where did it come from?
Yeah, so Bookvault is part of a larger company called Print on Demand Worldwide. We've been in the UK as a digital printer for longer than me, actually. So we've been just shy of 30 years. And primarily we've always worked with larger academic publishers in the UK, Bloomsbury, Taylor & Francis, Oxford University Press and people like that. And generally we've always been a POD printer, so single copies or very low run quantities. Bookvault's been going for around 10 years and was built to kind of service those and make it a hands-off platform for them to be able to manage their orders and deal with distribution and things like that. And it wasn't until COVID, where everyone was kind of taking a step back and looking at how their business worked, that we also did the same and realised that it would make so much more sense to open it up to the wider market. So people think we're fairly new, but actually, in fact, we've been around for longer in some cases than some of the big companies that you're used to.
Yeah, this is what's interesting. Print on demand is not a new technology. Digital printing is not new. And there's actually a lot of companies, probably in your town, wherever you are, that do print on demand. But the thing is, almost none of those companies want to work with individual authors because it's a hassle. The number of units is really small. They'd much rather work with a catalog company who's going to print 100,000 units, or an academic institution that's making these big orders for these expensive textbooks. And so the trick is that software piece, which is why we're talking to you, because making the software where the authors can set it up themselves without having to pay a lot of money, or where you don't have to have a lot of staff helping them, is really key for making print on demand actually work in the real world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we always worked with larger publishers, and actually it's a completely different mindset, which we actually prefer. It's really nice to more focus on, obviously pricing is always important, and we still try and be competitive there, but focus as well on making a really nice product and giving people a nice service, as opposed to cutting corners to try and make the cheapest book possible.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because you don't just do paperbacks, because print on demand paperback, Amazon does that all right, Ingram Spark does that all right, but what you offer is hardbacks, and in the UK and soon in the US, high quality hardbacks, like cloth bound hardbacks with foil and embossing, and the sort of thing that feels like an offset print book. And if you're trying to create a special edition or a special hardback, having a really high quality book really matters, and readers do care about that, and particularly younger readers. in my experience, the older a reader is, the less they tend to care about book quality and are more likely to read ebooks. But the younger they are, the more likely they are to want nice hardbacks that they can show off on their shelf. So millennials and even Gen Z really lean towards that. It's not to say that boomers don't want hardback, but boomers grew up with cheap paperbacks, so they don't mind a cheap paperback, and they may not want to pay extra, right? It's like, oh, I have the choice. I can get the paperback for $15, or I can get the hardback for $30. I'll get the paperback for $15. A millennial is more likely to choose that hardback for $30 in general. Obviously, how much money you have to spend will affect that decision quite a bit.
And it's interesting as well. We've seen hardbacks and more fancy editions good for that higher sale price, but also it's more likely for the reader to post about it on TikTok or Instagram and things like that. So not only is it a good way of earning more money, but it's also a good way of trying to further market your book from your readers to you. It's free advertising, really.
Yeah, it's how it looks on your shelf.
Exactly.
Shelf candy. In fact, it's not uncommon. In fact, I do this. I will buy special edition hardbacks just to put on my shelf because I listen to the audiobook. So the way that I encounter a Brandon Sanderson book is by listening to Michael Kramer and Kate Redding read it to me. But I'll buy his limited edition, Kickstarter books that are very beautiful and look really great on my shelf. And I want to own it, right? I want to have that nice artifact of this experience that I had. I'm a very basic millennial in this way.
We've even seen people relaunch their backlist, so they've already got readers that have read the book and they'll relaunch it with a special edition, and those same readers will rebuy it. So it's a really good way of rejuvenating your backlist as well.
Now, I want to talk about why this is special, because being able to print a hardback, people have been doing this for hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? The folio was invented like about 2,000 years ago, right? We moved away from the scroll to the hardback 2,000 years ago. What's interesting about your approach is that you're able to do nice hardbacks on demand. So let's explain some publishing terminology here, because we've been throwing out some terms like POD. So typically, if you want a nice hardback, you have to have what's called an offset run. And this is where they have these big metal plates that are etched with the text of your book, and they're put on this giant roller. And the creation of those metal plates is very expensive. It's a one-time cost, and then they'll roll paper through this roller at this insane speed, and it will print all of the pages. And then they have this big stack of pages, and then they have a binding machine that binds it. It's this whole long process that is kind of similar to what Gutenberg was doing. Obviously, it's way faster and more efficient now, but it's the same kind of deal where the first book may take a week to produce, and then the second book takes a week and 30 seconds to produce. So you have this big upfront cost and a lot of upfront work to get those plates made. And because of that, you can't just print one copy. You want to print thousands of copies. And where the real money in traditional publishing is offset printing a whole lot of books so you get your per unit cost down, and that's where you make your margins. And so the money in traditional publishing is with the best-selling authors. They lose money on the kind of mid-list and below, or they can, because so many of the costs in publishing are fixed costs, right? The editing is a fixed cost, the plates are fixed cost. Obviously, there's some variable costs, and paper getting more expensive was tough on the industry. But what you offer is on-demand hardbacks. So let's rewind. So then print on demand came around, offering to authors. CreateSpace did it really early. I think Ingram Spark did it early. CreateSpace ended up getting purchased by Amazon. And what these allowed was for an individual paperback book to be printed digitally, kind of like, think of a really expensive version of your laser printer at home. So, right, your laser printer prints one sheet of paper, and then it prints another sheet of paper, and it's able to print. Each sheet can be different than the sheet before it. Right? I'm oversimplifying. I realize that your machines are way more expensive than a laser printer, but it's that same kind of idea. It's like a giant photocopier, and it can print a book, and then the next book off the machine can be a totally different book from a totally different author, and you slap a paperback cover on it. And the advantage of this was that you could get just one copy, and you could customize it, and you could make changes, and you found a typo, and so you very quickly changed the typo, and now all the future versions have the typo fixed. You don't have to go, re-etch plates and get another print run done. The downside of print on demand, and this is still the case, today, and this is not something that y'all have solved, and I don't think it's solvable, is that the per unit cost is always going to be higher to get a single print-on-demand book than it is to get 100,000 offset print copies on a per unit basis, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But spending $200,000 to get 100,000 copies of your book and paying for the shipping and warehousing of that, suddenly you're $250,000 in, and that's a lot of money up front to pay for a book that may not sell that many units. And what print on demand has done is it has allowed independent authors to etch out a middle class income. You don't get rich because the margins aren't great, but you are able to make money selling one unit at a time. So is that a pretty good summary, kind of the history of what brings us here? So you're kind of the next step of that evolution, where you're taking what's being done in softback and you're extending it to hardback. And I will say Amazon has done this a little bit. So I have here I believe this is an Amazon printed hardback. So for those of you watching the video version, it's hard. You know, it's got a hardback, but the printing still feels like a softback, right? It's full color cover. And what y'all have unlocked in the UK and are bringing to the US very soon, which I'm very excited about, is cloth, because it's that cloth hardback that's the full package. And up to this point, the only real way to get a cloth hardback with the gold lettering with the dust jacket, right, that full experience, is to go offset. And so being able to bring that on demand connected to the website is a real game changer for authors.
Yeah, and I think that's all kind of been driven by our owner, Andy Cork, when he set up the business 30 years ago. So I guess that's why we've always been a bit outside of the traditional way of printers in terms of doing things that maybe others wouldn't. So that's why we offer the 6 different bindings. We offer, certainly in the UK and will soon be around the world, we offer the different types of papers and also sizing as well. We're not limited to set sizing brackets. We literally allow you to put any size you determine between A6 and 297 millimeters squared. So quite a huge size.
So Alex will tell you that he handles all of those sizes. I will tell you, as podcast host, only do the 2 standard sizes.
100%. Yeah. Yes. It is one of those.
Look better on the shelf with all the other books. It makes all of the logistics simpler because there's all kinds of boxes and things that are preset. So unless you have a good reason for an unusual size, stick with one of the normal sizes.
Without doubt, yes.
Now, speaking of unusual sizes, where you most commonly see unusual sizes is with children's books. Are you able to do like a 30-page children's book with color on the inside?
Yeah, so we have slightly different papers compared to the other providers that are currently on the market. So we invested just shy of £2 million in a new printer and finishing unit, and we were one of the first to bring print on demand via inkjet. So inkjet is, as you mentioned, kind of your desktop printer, but instead there's what I would equivalent as, and this is how I say it, 2 shipping containers side by side. One prints the top of the sheet, one prints the bottom of the sheet, and then it goes through a big finishing unit which then chops it up into the individual pages. And what that printer has enabled us to do is use coated stocks. So whereas traditionally if you were to use a coated stock, it would usually have to be toner, which is a slower sheet-fed printer, we can use this big roll, which means in some cases we can print at 120 meters per minute. So we can really churn out books quite quickly, and that obviously helps drive down the cost. So yeah, kids' books, we can do less than, I think the minimum page count on our 150 paper, I think it's 28. So we can do really low page count kids' books. And also, certainly, you have the ability to print on the inside of the cover as well. So duplex printing, where you open the first page, it's not white, it's actually got printed on the inside as well, which fits in really nicely.
So you can put all the ABCs on the opening, so you can sing the song before you read the book. And 28 pages is just enough for an opening page, a page for each letter, and a couple closing pages, and boom, it's like it's right around the length of a lot of children's books. And you add about the author page or something.
Yes.
Fill up your 28 pages. I guess there's 3 areas where I see Bookvault being useful for indie authors. There's the selling directly, which I've alluded to several times, which I encourage you to listen to the Joanna Penn interview. And this is where your website is connected with Bookvault, and they have an API. So if you're using PayHip or WooCommerce or Shopify, somebody will place the order on your website, and then your website will communicate to Bookvault, and Bookvault will print and ship the book, which is great. And it's relatively straightforward. But for a lot of authors, they don't want to set up e-commerce on their website. That's a bridge too far for them. They just want to sell on Amazon, but they are doing a Kickstarter for each of their new books. So I guess my big question is, can I deliver you a CSV or a list of the names and addresses of everyone who needs books of the various kinds, right? This is the list for paperback and this is the list for hardback. And can you just take that and get all of those people books and just give me a bill?
Yes, yeah. So there's a way that we do it currently is you'll email our support team the spreadsheet from Kickstarter and tell us what pledge reward is what product, and we can link that up and ship out what's need be. We're in the final stages of testing where it'll be all on the website, so you can literally log onto our website, upload your spreadsheet and place the orders there and then. So we're obviously, if it has to be done by support, it takes a couple of days usually to process, and we'll send you a link to pay for them all. With the website plugin that we're building, it will literally be a matter of 20 minutes to validate the orders and put your credit card details in. So that'll be a massive step forward.
This is where I put on my old man voice. I'm like, back when I was a kid. It took me 2 days. I got this massive box of books from CreateSpace, and me and a bunch of friends and my whole family set up an assembly line at my parents' house, and we were slapping labels on things, and it had this big operation, and we had to pay shipping twice. So we shipped the books to me, and then I shipped the books out to the person. And so for you to be able to take that address that they put in through Kickstarter and mail out the books, it's a huge cost reduction and time reduction, because that whole operation that I had to do where we were, putting books in, I wasn't able to do. The one downside of this approach is that you can't deliver a signed copy this way. So for signed copies, you'll still have to get Bookvault to mail you the copies, and then you have to then mail them out yourself. And so if you're putting together a Kickstarter, keep this in mind. There's a real cost in time and in shipping to a signed copy. It's not just you scratching on a page. So we talked about Kickstarter, and I love how easy this is, because that is staggeringly easy. I suspect several people are now on your website right now because they have a Kickstarter coming up. Let's talk about pricing. In broad brush. Obviously, you have a calculator on your website, and the pricing varies. In my experience, the sweet spot for print on demand is between 200 and 250 pages. Is that still the case, or is that the case for you, where that's where you're most likely to make your kind of highest margin, right? If you had a 700-page book, you're looking at a pretty high per unit cost.
Yeah, so our printing works a little bit different to Amazon KDP. It's very similar to Ingram. It's all simplified, so you get one unit price on our quoting calculator, but to put it into perspective, we charge per bind. So we charge for a paperback binding or a hardback binding, and then we charge per page. So there's a flat per page cost there. Something we do slightly differently is we do something called split color. So if you've got, say, 2 color pages and 100 mono pages, we'll only charge you for those 2 color pages and the rest are mono. So that's a bit of a different thing to the way that other people do it. But yeah, you're very right. Generally, 200 to 300 is generally the sweet spot, but we can go all the way to, I think, one of our papers over 1,000 pages. So I wouldn't recommend a lot of pages. Not a nice book to read, but people do it.
I love that. So if I'm writing a fantasy book and I want to have a color map, but I don't want to pay for color for the whole thing, I can just pay for 2 pages of color.
Yes. People do color chapter headings as well, which are really nice. Yeah, all things like that. So it's a really neat way of, especially when we talk about direct selling, it's a way of, selling the traditional book on Amazon, and then via your Kickstarter or your own website, selling this really nice colored edition that you can either up the price, or it gives you a reason for people to buy direct over Amazon because they get that bonus feature.
I love that. Everybody wants to have color, right, for those handful of pages that are color, but when you toggle on color and it doubles the price of your book, you're like, I don't think it's worth double the price. But here we're looking at what, extra 30 cents, extra 40 cents a copy?
It literally is a matter of 2 pence or 3 cents per page. So if you had just 1 or 2 color pages, you wouldn't really even notice it.
Wow. If I wanted to do that, right? So like I've got a fantasy book, I want to have my color map, but I don't want to pay for color for the whole thing. Can I have Bookvault supply into the Amazon ecosystem where somebody places an order on Amazon and Bookvault prints and ships the book?
Yeah, so we do handle distribution. I always like to put a caveat out there and be open and honest that we're not to the scale that Ingram are. They're obviously distribute all over the world. We've been very much UK focused, but we are kind of expanding quite rapidly this year. But in terms of Amazon, what we do is we list on the major marketplaces, so UK, US, most of Europe as well, and we list as a third-party seller. So it's a bit different to KDP, where obviously the book would be on Prime and they wouldn't have to pay for shipping. With us, they would, and there's a slightly longer lead time. But what it does enable you to do is sell on Amazon, whereas you wouldn't be able to with products like that. And what we do then is we enable you to choose the retail percentage you want to give, and then we remit royalties at the end of the month. We do it on a 60-day period.
Okay, do you have any plans to supply where you get distribute into the Amazon warehouses where it's shipped by Amazon?
We do that with certain customers, so it'll be a case that they work directly with us and we fulfill Amazon Advantage orders and stuff like that. So we have the capabilities to do it. It's very much more of a kind of arrangement basis, but it's certainly something we do, and we do regularly as well.
Yeah, I suspect for most authors, it's smarter to just go with KDP for their Amazon sales, because it's 100%. So easy. And I will say, all of this nice stuff that we're talking about is more complicated than just going into KDP and uploading your book, because KDP is so simple and it's already there on Amazon. So you just upload your files for the paperback, you upload your files for the ebook, and then you're done. Right? It's like there are companies, hybrid publishers will charge you thousands of dollars for doing what you could do yourself in 30 minutes. Bookvault is more work. And where it really shines, I feel, is in that direct sales through your website and like Kickstarter orders, or if you have some really special needs for your children's books, because KDP and Ingram Spark both fall on their faces for children's books. I have not yet to see a children's book that can hold its own / survive my children. They love them. We have a bunch of KDP children's books. My children love reading them, but my children eat books. We're on our third copy of Dr. Seuss ABC. There's a certain teething that children go through where they want to gnaw on something, and paper is like that perfect thing that they gnaw on. And if it's not a high enough quality paper, if it's not a high enough quality binding, the book just gets demolished. So I feel like those are the three primary uses. But it sounds like you could, if you wanted to, fulfill all the way through into Amazon Advantage.
Yeah, and certainly another thing that quite a lot of people use this for is author-owned copies. So as you say, if you're going to an event or you're doing a Kickstarter from your own table, we handle all the author-owned copies. So generally with pricing in the US and the UK, we sit on par or just below Ingram, really. And then in terms of order processing, I know with Amazon you can only order one, like a quantity of our title, and that's its own separate order. Whereas with us, you can kind of build a cart and place 100 of one of another, and that all kind of comes to a total, and they all get shipped together as well.
So if I'm speaking at a big event and I want 100 copies of my book, I can go on your website, I can order 100 copies of my book shipped to the hotel, and I can make it a special edition, right, with color chapter headings and a color map that's only available if you buy it from me. And because I'm there speaking at the event or at the book fair or whatever, I can sign the books in front of folks and customize it. And now it's not a choice of, I could save $2 if I buy it on Amazon. It's like, no, this is a special edition. It's signed by me. It's worth that extra premium. And by selling it in person, I get to keep almost all of the money because I'm getting the retailer share, and the shipping on a per unit basis is pretty low. So that's another really good use of print on demand, and it's nice to be able to have those author copies. And I feel like every author needs at least 20 or 30 copies at home.
Just in case.
In case, you never know. Yeah, because I will say, you'll need, what's the lead time on that? So if I find out a month from now I'm speaking at this big event, could you get me books in a month, or do you need more notice than that? Yeah,
so in the US, we're printing in 3 to 5 days at the moment. We had a bit of a rough patch over Christmas last year. We were really knocked back by demand. I think we opened our US facility. We're expecting it to gradually climb up, and we were all of a sudden hit by a mass amount of orders. So we've learnt from that, and as we talked earlier, we're launching our second facility very soon to work there. And then the plan in the long term is to actually have a physical entity out there instead of using partners, which would be good. But in the US, it's 3 to 5 days. In the UK, our standard lead time is 3 to 5 days. But what we can do is we have rush and priority services as well. So you can choose to get a book out in paperback, it's same day. So if you place that order, it'll be shipped same day. And hardback, it's 2 to 3 days. So you can kind of prioritize those. There is a bit of an uplifting cost, but it's there as in case of emergency situation. We literally drop everything and print them and get them out the door for you.
Yeah. Which is common with printers, and when possible, try to avoid those rush fees.
100%. Yeah,
you can save yourself so much money and save the printer so much hassle by just more notice. But sometimes you don't know, and occasionally an author will have a book that gets featured by some celebrity or some book talker dances with it, and the demand goes through the roof. And sometimes you just need the copies right now, and it's nice to be able to place the order for that. I will say this is part of the reason I waited so long to interview you, because I knew that you underestimated the American demand for a service like this.
It was one of those, so we worked with Baker and Taylor initially in the US there, who our facility is there at the moment, and in conjunction with us getting a lot of demand, they also received a massive order from their other customer, Amazon, and things like that. It was a difficult time, but certainly one we've learnt from. And what we did was reroute stuff to the UK and print it and send it as a priority. But we've put a lot more contingencies in place now, because we like to put our hands up and say we learnt from it. It's certainly something that we won't let happen again.
And to put on our business hats, what he's doing to help accommodate this, you're having more than one vendor in the US, so that if one is really busy, the other one is less likely to be busy for the same factors. Obviously, if there's a pandemic or something that hits everybody, there's nothing you can do. But most of the time, having a second vendor really helps. And this is really common in tech, where a lot of companies will insist on having 2 vendors for some critical chip. So there's an earthquake underneath your memory factory. We don't want our whole operation to be ground to a halt.
And it's something we found really tricky, especially in the US. Print seems to be a little bit behind what it is in the UK. It's very much, especially when we talk about these special editions, you'll say to even things like in the UK, we can do a printed hardback with a jacket on. We'll go to a US print POD provider and they can't believe we're doing it. So that's certainly a new thing we've learned. And that's why it's made getting a second partner tricky, because not only are we looking for them to be able to do what we can do, we're equally very stipulate on kind of the quality as well. That's something we pride ourselves on, is the quality of the books. So we want to make sure that they look good. We don't want to just send out the traditional stuff. I know certainly with KDP it's fantastic, but we want a thicker cover board so it's less flimsy. We want nicer paper and better colour qualities. It's one of those, finding a printer that's happy to do POD, variety, good price, and also really good quality of books as well.
We have been behind you in printing since the Revolutionary War. There may come a day when we will catch up, but it is not this day. And I will say we're both still behind China. China had a 400-year head start on papermaking and print technology, and they're still out ahead. They're still doing stuff. So, for instance, if you get a Bibles have an incredibly thin paper. Yep. It's staggeringly thin, and you can still read it. Almost all Bibles are printed in China because they're the ones who have that technology for making that level of quality of paper at scale. Because the other thing is, you look at that Bible with that incredibly thin paper, and it's $8.
Yeah,
how on earth they pull that off? Now they're printing, millions of them.
Certainly
in order,
not POD.
They have some great economies of scale to make that work. But it's interesting how these big historical trends still affect us today. It's easy to think, we're Americans, we have the best technology and everything. It's some areas we're still behind the British. We still have some ways to go. Let's walk through the process. So I'm an author. I've just gotten back the final edits on my book. So I have a Word document with the final edits. And so what I would do is I'd go into Vellum and I would generate a PDF and send you the PDF. Is that the next step? Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah. So you would want a print-ready PDF. So we accept the same sort of files that you would upload to Ingram and KDP. So generally the bulking, so that the bulking is what we define as the spine width effectively. Our papers pretty much match Ingram or KDP. The only caveat to that is if you've got a defined spine. So that's where maybe you've got a yellow front cover, a yellow back cover, and then a green spine. That's the only time I would say you need to be a bit cautious. But equally with POD, I would never really recommend having a defined spine, because there is always a level of kind of movement that the book can have with it being a kind of quickly made product. But yet once you've got those, you upload it to our portal.
So we have two PDFs.
Yep.
We have one for the interior of the book, which we would
Yep.
make inside of Vellum, Atticus if you're a Windows user. And we'll have links to both of these software tools. So that makes the inside of the file. And then you have a second PDF that's the outside of the book. And that's what you're talking about in terms of spine width. And you, as an author, should not be making the cover. If you're making the cover yourself, you have made some really bad life decisions that have brought you to this place. You need to work with a professional designer who is making that cover for you and is delivering for you a print-ready PDF for the cover. And so when we say give the PDF to the printer, what we're really meaning is both PDFs, the inside and the outside PDF. So I've gone to Bookvault and I've uploaded the two PDFs, the inside and the outside. Then now what happens?
So I like to mention as well, so we charge an upload fee per title. The reason that is there is because when we took our realignment and moved it and opened it to everyone, in the space of a weekend, someone uploaded literally 20,000 books, all with different pictures of kittens on them, and tried to push them to Amazon. And it just completely ground all our processes to a halt because we were trying to get all of these kittens onto Amazon behind all these actual books that we're going to sell. So we had to introduce a £19.95 upload fee, or $24.95. That's a one-off fee. You pay it per title you add. But equally, we work with a lot of organisations as well. So we work with the Alliance of Independent Authors, Novelist Incorporated, and a couple more. They're all on our website under our FAQ. We kind of list everyone we work with to give free title uploads. So you don't have to pay that fee. It's literally there as kind of a blocker to stop people that actually don't want to sell their books uploading files to the platform. But yeah, as you say, once you've got your two PDFs, you'll upload them to the platform. It validates them there and then. So you don't have to wait what you would do with Ingram, a couple of days for someone to validate it. It will whizzle away and then give you ticks to say it's all ready. Or if it's not, it will give you guidance on what to do and you can pass that back to your cover designer. And then as soon as that's done, it's then ready to order. So there's no waiting around. As soon as you've got those ticks and it's marked as active, you can place a single proof copy to yourself, for instance. You can
Which you always want to do.
100%, yeah. We've seen so many people do Kickstarters, for instance, never do a proof, order 150, 200 copies, and we see it coming off the end of the press and the text is hanging out the thing because they've done it as the wrong size. And yeah, 100% always do a proof, no matter what. But yeah, once you've done that, you can then, as I say, place orders as and when you want. You can also distribute it or link it up to your own store through our apps and plugins as well.
So once the book is there, I can place a big order for myself. And for some authors, they pay the $20 or the $25 to get their book there, and now they have a way where they can easily order bulk orders. But they could also connect it to their website. So you have a Zapier connection, which means that, is that right? Where anything that connects to Zapier can place orders through your system?
Yep, so we have Zapier. We also have more bespoke integrations for the larger e-commerce platforms. So Shopify and WooCommerce. So WooCommerce is through WordPress. And then Wix as well. We have built-in dedicated apps for them. So you go onto the plugin store or the app store and you download our dedicated app and it sets everything up. So it kind of sets that link up and also deals with all the shipping profiles as well. And then we have Zapier to connect other products up. And we're also working with PayHip as well to build a dedicated app, which will be very exciting as well.
Yeah, I'm excited. When I saw PayHip, I got really excited because PayHip is my current favorite tool for that. But it looks like right now, as we were recording this, PayHip is still going through Zapier. Whenever possible, I recommend avoiding Zapier. It's glitchy and it's less reliable than a true first-party integration.
Certainly with Zapier, things like ebooks. Obviously, BookFunnel have a direct integration with PayHip. With Zapier, it will send a signal for each ebook that's sold as well. So you tick up those usages and stuff like that. So that's why PayHip were always a little bit slow to respond, but now they're kind of working directly with us and we're working with a beta tester and things like that, and it will literally bring live shipping rates and order confirmations and literally everything you can do in Shopify to PayHip. So I am looking forward to the day we release that because it's a big platform used by a lot of people, and it's also a lot simpler than Shopify because Shopify is fantastic and it's really good for scaling a business, but it's also a lot of work to set up and sometimes a bit overkill for what people need.
Yeah, this is one area where I differ from Joanna Penn. Joanna Penn really pushes Shopify. And for somebody who has a larger scale, you're selling $1,000 or more of books every month, I feel like Shopify potentially can make sense because there are some advantages. But if you're selling less than $1,000 a month, PayHip, I think, is much better because it's the seller of record. It handles sales tax and VAT taxes for you, and it's much easier to set up. And I don't think there's any monthly fees. So if you're only selling, 2 or 3 books a month, you don't want to be paying $20 a month in monthly fees because that'll eat up all of your profits. But there's no monthly fee with Bookvault.
No, there's not.
So there's just the upload fee. So I pay one time to upload, and then it's only on a per unit basis.
Exactly.
And there's no monthly fee with PayHip, which means if I'm using PayHip and I have PayHip on my website, I'm not paying any monthly fees. I'm just occasionally getting money from people who are buying my book. And if you're just getting started, or if you've got some older books that aren't moving very quickly, that's way better than spending all this money to get set up with Shopify and paying some big monthly fee with Shopify. And I can't wait for your PayHip integration. I like that you're actively adding features, right? So you're soon going to have the case-bound cloth for the U.S. market, and you're soon going to have these software tools. I've been waiting. I feel like you're just finally got there where I can recommend this as a service. But for those of you listening to these episodes in the future, because I know a lot of people listen to our back catalog years and years later. So some of these features may already be there. And if you want to check out what Bookvault has, it's bookvault.app. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
So don't go to bookvault.com. That's somebody else's website. We'll have a link to the website in the show notes. And I encourage you, if you are using Bookvault right now, feel free to post a link to your store or your website in the comments. And other authors may order your book just to see what the Bookvault experience is like and how fast it's delivered. And before we go, Alex Smith, do you have any final words of encouragement or advice?
Certainly from our point of view, from a Bookvault thing, we offer free meetings. So one thing I always like to give a bit of advice as well is if you're in the stage of wanting to set up direct sales or have questions that maybe haven't been answered in this podcast, go onto our website, click the contact us button, and you can literally book in a meeting with one of our team of experts. We don't charge for it as well. It's completely free. So we're able to help you, point you in the right direction, or tell you what we can and can't do, or any simple questions you might have or answer with.
That's great. Most people don't want to talk to authors on the phone. So, Alex Smith, thank you so much for joining us today on the Novel Marketing Podcast. That website again is bookvault.app if you want to check them out. After we stopped recording, I talked with Alex Smith about Bookvault offering free setup for novel marketing patrons, and he agreed. So, if you're a patron of the Novel Marketing Podcast, you can avoid that one-time $25 setup fee when using Bookvault. So for more info, just go to novelmarketing.com/patron. Patrons don't just get that as a perk. They also get a bonus episode every month, as well as a lot of discounts on my various courses and a lot more. Speaking of patrons, our featured patron today is Peter DeHaan, author of Women of the Bible. The Bible is filled with stories of fascinating women. Dig into their lives to uncover how these remarkable women rise above their circumstances in a society that too often pushes them down. Women of the Bible is written by Peter DeHaan, and the audiobook is narrated by James L. Rubart. Peter, thank you for being a patron. Thank you for your support that helps keep this podcast on the air. I could not do the Novel Marketing Podcast without you and the other patrons. Our guest today was Alex Smith. Our producer is Lori Christine. The audio engineering is by William Umstadt. And blogification is by Shauna Lettler. To read that blog version of this episode and find links to everything we talked about, visit authormedia.com/419. I'm Thomas Umstadt Jr. saying thank you for listening and live long and prosper.